love to say that betrayal is obvious, that you always know when someone has crossed a line, that your body will signal it, that your voice will sharpen, that some clean instinct inside you will stand up and say, "There, that is the moment." I do not think that is true. I think some betrayals arrive wearing errands, a practical question, a scheduling text, a favor between old friends, a sentence delivered so calmly that you almost answer it before you hear what it means. My name is Lena. I was 31 when I learned that some people do not ask for your blessing. They ask for your disappearance, spoken politely enough that you feel rude for recognizing it. The property was mine, though I still called it my mother's garden when I was tired. It sat behind the house I inherited 2 years earlier, a low brick place at the edge of town, with fig trees, climbing jasmine, and a stone terrace my parents had built back when they still believed all the important parts of life could be made solid if you laid enough things by hand. My mother used to host everything there: birthdays, graduation dinners, a cousin's engagement lunch, my brother's rehearsal barbecue. If there was too much grief for a dining room, or too much joy for a restaurant, people ended up in that garden. So when Naomi and Eric asked if they could hold their wedding there, it did not feel strange. It felt almost flattering. We had all known each other for years. Naomi and I met at work, back when both of us were junior enough to pretend shared exhaustion was intimacy. Eric was one of those men who learned social confidence early, and then spent the rest of his life collecting benefits from it. He remembered bartenders, names. He hugged like he had invented sincerity. He could ask for a large favor in the exact tone people use for offering help. They had gotten engaged quickly, not recklessly exactly, just with the urgency of two people who cared very much about momentum. Their venue had collapsed 4 months before the date. There was some permit issue, some management shuffle, some apology email with no real remedy. Naomi cried in my kitchen about deposits. Eric paced my patio like the stones might offer alternatives. I was the one who said it first. "What about here?" I still remember how relieved they looked. Not moved. Relieved. As if I had restored a timeline that mattered more to them than the fact that I was giving them something precious. For a while it was easy. We walked the garden with notepads. Talked about table placement. Talked about whether the string lights could stay up through late October. Talked about where the caterer could unload, where older relatives could sit, which bathroom guests would use, how to route people away from the side gate that stuck in damp weather. I loaned them folding chairs, introduced them to the florist my mother loved, spent 2 Saturday afternoons clearing a storage shed so the bar setup would fit. If you had asked me then whether I felt used, I would have laughed. No, I felt needed. That is not the same thing. But it can look similar for a dangerous amount of time. By then, my relationship with Owen was already over. Owen was not some great ruined love. He was just the man I had spent almost 3 years with before realizing that consistency is not the same thing as honesty. He had a gentle voice, a neat apartment, and a talent for making every selfish choice sound like an unfortunate complication. Nothing explosive ended us. No smashed glass. No one night of dramatic revelation. Just the slow, exhausting realization that he preferred comfort to truth and expected me to help preserve both. The breakup was 6 months old by the time wedding planning began. Painful, yes, but not fresh in the way people perform concern. I was not collapsing. I was rebuilding. Quietly, competently, the way women often do while everyone else praises them for being so mature. And then I met Julian. Not immediately after. Not as a rebound, not because I was trying to prove anything. I met him at a volunteer fundraiser, argued with him about coffee, and liked him because he listened with his whole face. He was not flashy. He was not strategic. He did not seem to think other people existed to organize the weather around his emotions. By the time Naomi mailed the invitations, Julian and I had been together long enough that nobody reasonable would have called him random. He had been to dinner with my brother. He had fixed the stubborn latch on my garden gate. He knew which rosemary bush my mother had planted last. He was not hypothetical. He was part of my life. The invitation arrived on a Wednesday. Cream paper, green lettering, my address in Naomi's looping hand. Inside was 1 seat, not 2. No guest line. No +1. Just my name. At first I assumed it was an oversight. The kind of clerical mistake that happens when stressed people are moving too fast. I even smiled. I texted Naomi a photo with a joking message. Did the printer break up with Julian for me? She did not answer for 3 hours. When she finally did, it was not a joke back. It was, "Can we talk later? It's complicated." Nothing good has ever followed that sentence. We met on my patio that night. The same patio where she had cried over her venue. The same patio where I had promised, without paperwork, that my family home could hold her beginning. She sat with both hands around a glass of water she barely touched. She said Owen had been having a hard time. She said he was still processing. She said some mutual friends thought it might be best if we all avoided unnecessary discomfort. I remember staring at her, waiting for the rest. The rest, it turned out, was that Julian was the discomfort. Owen had heard I was bringing someone. Owen was upset. Owen felt the event would become awkward. Owen had been around longer. Owen was still connected to more people in that circle. Owen was apparently trying very hard not to make it weird. Which meant, in the moral algebra of group convenience, I was being asked to do that for him. Naomi said, "It's not that we don't want you there. We absolutely do. We just think maybe, for one day, you could come solo, so nobody feels blindsided." I asked her if she heard herself. She winced, not because she agreed, but because I had said the quiet part out loud. I asked, "You want to marry your husband in my mother's garden, using my house, my time, my keys, my storage, my labor, and you're asking me to arrive alone so my ex can feel more comfortable?" She said, "Please don't make it sound ugly." That sentence changed everything, because I had not made it ugly. I had made it accurate. Accuracy is what sounds cruel to people who need the soft version. Naomi started crying. Not with guilt, with pressure, with the tears of someone who sincerely believes that if she is distressed enough, her request becomes gentler. She said she was stuck in the middle. She said Eric thought this was the cleanest option. She said Owen was fragile. She said it was only one day. She said she hoped, as her friend, I would understand the position she was in. That part nearly made me laugh, because the position she was in was a position on my terrace, asking me to fund my own humiliation. I told her I needed time. She left with the glass still nearly full. I stood alone, among the citronella candles, hearing the word solo repeat in my head, like something from a cheap translation. Solo. As if Julian were an accessory. As if my life could be set down in a basket by the door for the evening. I called my brother first. Then I called Julian. My brother got angry fast, which was useful. Rage can sometimes lend structure to the truth. He said, "They don't want a venue. They want compliance. There's a difference." Julian was quieter. He asked if I wanted him to step back for the day. That broke my heart a little, not because he was weak, but because kind people always offer to shrink first. They learn early that it smooths the room. I told him no. Immediately, more sharply than I intended. Then I apologized. Then he said, "Don't apologize for loving me in full size." If he had said nothing else to me, that sentence would still have been enough. The next morning, Eric called. Not Naomi, Eric. Which told me exactly who believed he could close the sale. He began in that measured voice people use when they think adulthood is mostly tone management. He said everyone loved me. He said no one was trying to disrespect me. He said wedding planning had become complicated and emotions were high. He said the group was just trying to avoid unnecessary drama. Then he said the line, "I have never forgotten. You know this day isn't really about you." It was so naked, so accidentally honest, that for a second I almost admired it. Because there it was. The whole belief system. My home was about them. My labor was about them. My social obedience was about them. My own appearance on my own property was subject to what best supported the atmosphere they preferred. I asked him whether he had any idea how obscene this sounded. He sighed, as if I were making a simple thing difficult. He said, "If Owen sees you with someone, it'll shift the energy. And honestly, we need this to go smoothly." I said, "Then find another yard." He was silent long enough that I knew he had not believed that was an available outcome. Then his voice changed, a little flatter. He asked if I was really willing to jeopardize years of friendship over one guest. I said, "If you still think this is about one guest, you haven't been listening." And then I told him, very clearly, that they would not be using my house or my property for the wedding. I expected anger. What I did not expect was the speed with which silence would be turned against me. For the first week, I told almost no one what happened. Partly because I was stunned. Partly because I was embarrassed. There is a special humiliation in being treated badly for being generous. It makes you feel naive, in a way cruelty alone cannot. So when mutual friends texted, I kept my answers vague. Plans changed. It's no longer here. I need some space. I thought restraint would protect me. What restraint actually did was leave a stage empty for other people to fill. Soon the messages changed shape. Are you and Naomi okay? I heard there was a misunderstanding. I heard Julian got possessive. I heard you made a scene. I heard you were punishing them because Owen was invited too. I heard you were still not over the breakup. Rumors are fascinating that way. They never evolve toward complexity, only convenience. The story traveling through the group was not one I recognized. In it, I was difficult, volatile, territorial, unreasonable. A woman with a chip on her shoulder who had sabotaged a wedding out of residual jealousy. There are few things lonelier than hearing your own pain translated into gossip. By people who liked your food more than your personhood. Weeks passed. I ignored most of it. Not because I am enlightened. Because I did not know yet what kind of response would let me keep my dignity. Then Eric's mother wrote to me. Her message was careful. Not defensive. Not manipulative. She said she knew many people had opinions. But she wanted to hear mine directly. And if I did not want to talk, she would understand. I almost said no. By then, I distrusted proximity. Everyone seemed to want access for the purpose of reformatting me, but there was something in her note that did not feel hungry. So I agreed. We sat in the garden on a gray afternoon. No wedding lanterns, no floral plans, just two women and the remains of a season. One had stopped trusting. I told her everything. About the invitation, about Naomi's patio confession, about Eric's phone call, about the pressure to appear alone, about the way rumors had flourished inside the silence I thought was maturity. When I finished, I felt wrung out. Not dramatic. Just emptied. She asked if she could hug me. That small consent mattered more than some people will ever understand. It meant she saw me as a person, not a function. Then she did something almost nobody had done. Through the entire mess. She listened without trying to revise what I felt. Eventually, she said her son could be arrogant. More than arrogant, if she was being truthful. She said Naomi was so committed to preserving the wedding fantasy that she had stopped noticing what it was costing other people. She said heartbreak can make people act badly, but pain is not a permit. And she said, very plainly, that I was right to refuse. I nearly cried from the relief of being understood without being negotiated. That was the conversation that gave me my next decision. Not revenge, not public shaming. Clarity. I wrote one message. A long one. Not theatrical, not venomous, just factual. I explained why the wedding was no longer happening at my house. I explained that I had been asked to exclude my partner from an event on my own property for the comfort of my ex. I explained that I had not made a scene, that I had simply said no, and that if anyone arrived at my gate on the original date expecting a ceremony, I would turn them away. Then I sent it to everyone who had somehow acquired an opinion before acquiring the truth. The silence after that felt different. Not empty. Corrected. A few people apologized immediately. Good apologies. Not decorative ones. The kind that admit what was assumed, what was repeated, and what should have been asked sooner. Others never replied, which was answer enough. Naomi sent a paragraph about feeling attacked. I did not respond. Eric asked if we could speak privately because there had been miscommunications. That word almost made me smile. People love to call it miscommunication when the message was clear, and they simply preferred a different witness. The part that finally reached me later, through someone adjacent, was that Eric had told Naomi he had begged me to reconsider. That he had tried everything. That I had become cold and impossible. That the loss of the venue was essentially my emotional decision, not their structural insult. Even then, he wanted authorship without accountability. He wanted to be seen as the fixer, not the man who thought a woman should arrive, edited for the privilege of hosting his vows. The original date came and went. No one came to my gate. I spent that evening at home, with Julian, my brother, and 3 friends, who had proved by then that they knew the difference between support and curiosity. We ate too much roasted fish. We drank wine from mismatched glasses. At sunset, Julian turned on the string lights I had once imagined above Naomi's tables. For one painful second, I thought I might grieve the lost version of friendship more than I grieved the insult. But grief changes shape when truth is allowed to stay truth. Later that night, when everyone had gone, I stood alone on the patio. The jasmine had opened. The air smelled like memory without belonging to it. And I realized something that would have sounded dramatic to me before, but felt exact then. The worst part was never that they asked. The worst part was that they assumed I was the sort of woman who could be persuaded. That my generosity was evidence of softness. That my civility meant negotiability. That because I had once offered the garden freely, I might also offer the truth, my relationship, and my own place in the frame. They were wrong. And I think that is why this story stayed with me. Not because I lost friends. Plenty of adults discover that some friendships were only proximity with snacks. It stayed with me because I saw, with awful clarity, how easily a group can begin treating one person's dignity as the most convenient thing to sacrifice. Not out of hatred, out of comfort, out of logistics, out of narrative laziness, out of the selfish little hope that if the most reasonable person in the room keeps absorbing the blow, everyone else gets to call the evening peaceful. That is a dangerous social habit, and women especially are trained to mistake it for grace. Come alone. Don't react. Be mature. Take the high road. Don't make this uglier. Don't force people to choose. Don't embarrass anyone. Don't mention what really happened. The list is endless, and every item on it is just a more polished way of asking the injured person to pay for the atmosphere. I am not interested in that work anymore. If you want my garden, you get my life as it is. If you want my loyalty, you tell the truth in my absence. If you want my peace, you do not build it out of my reduction. People sometimes ask, months later, if I regret ending it so firmly, if I wish I had found a compromise, if losing the friendships was worth it. I think those questions misunderstand what a compromise would have required. A compromise was never that Julian stay home. A compromise was never that Owen feel less startled. A compromise was never that one wedding proceed smoothly. The actual compromise would have been me learning to smile inside erasure. Me teaching everyone watching that access to me included editorial rights. Me blessing the idea that if enough people find your reality inconvenient, you should present a simpler version. No, I lost an event. I lost a few relationships that depended on my self-minimizing. I lost the fantasy. That history alone makes people loyal. What I kept was far more useful. I kept the ability to hear a polished insult without translating it into my fault. I kept the reflex that says accuracy is not cruelty. I kept a love that did not ask to be folded smaller. And I kept my mother's garden as what it had always meant to be. A place where people could gather honestly, or not at all. So no, I did not let them marry there. And if I sound calm, telling it now, please do not mistake calm for uncertainty. Some endings become peaceful only after you refuse to become convenient first.
Thank you for watching. If this story pulled you in, do me one favor. Hit like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so the next one finds you the moment it drops. Remember, nothing is ever just what it seems. See you on the next one.